I am Tamara, and today we are going to be sewing the easiest tote bag you have ever sewn before. This is the perfect beginner sewer's project. If you've never sewn a bag before and you're interested, this tote bag here is what you want to be sewing. So this particular bag does not have a lining, so I highly recommend that you sew this bag using a canvas fabric. This is the tote bag. We're going to make our own handles to match our tote bag, so you really only have to buy around 3/4 a yard of fabric. Now it really does depend on the width of your fabric, whether or not you can get away with a 1/2 yard or not. So I'll let you figure out the math on that. I do have everything that you need in the description down below, and I've also done a blog post for you, so there you will find your cut list and all of the measurements as well, and the finished sizes for this tote bag. So check out that blog post and let's get started. So I am assuming that you have all of the sewing essentials. I have all of my favorite sewing tools linked in the description down below, but for this tutorial I have 2 tools that I really want to show you. This here is a measuring gauge. It is the cheapest sewing tool that I think I own, and I probably use it in every single one of my projects. So check the description down below. I will have this one linked, highly recommend. And then this here is perfect for beginner sewers. You don't have to get this one in particular. I will link to a bunch of different sewing stilettos. But the nice thing about a sewing stiletto is it allows you to push the fabric on through underneath that sewing foot. So if you find you're getting a little bit stuck, you can just push it on through with something like a sewing stiletto to keep your fingers safe and to keep your frustration levels nice and calm so that you can keep sewing this tote bag. Use all-purpose thread and pre-wash that fabric. All right, let's jump on in. Cut your main piece of fabric at 15 inches by 35 inches, and then 2 straps will be cut at 3 inches by 27 inches. Take the main piece of fabric and fold it right sides together so the inside lining is facing out. Line up those side edges, clip them in place, and then sew a 1/2 inch seam along both side edges. You will start and stop with a back stitch. This next step can be done 2 different ways. One way is you can use a pair of pinking shears and you can snip along both of your raw edges where you just sewed your 1/2 inch seam allowance, and that will stop your fabric from fraying. But because we don't have a lining to this fabric, I actually recommend sewing a zigzag stitch down both of these side seams. Again, start and stop with a back stitch. And this is what it looks like with that zigzag stitch along both side seams. Now it's time to get our handles ready. To prepare your straps, you will fold your strap in half, wrong sides facing in, and then just press it so that you have a nice center crease. Once you've done that, then both long edges need to be folded in a 1/2 inch towards that center fold. As I'm pressing this 1/2 inch crease all the way along, I will check on it with my measuring gauge to make sure that it is a 1/2 inch all the way across. Do this, of course, on both sides, and then you can fold your strap in half, once again lining up those 2 outer edges and clipping it in place. Now we will sew a seam along that open edge first. So start with a back stitch, then sew an 1/8 inch seam allowance along that edge, then just pivot down to the other corner and sew that 1/8 inch seam allowance again along that side, and then stop with a back stitch. And this is how your finished straps will look once you've finished those seams. Now we need to attach our straps to our tote bag. So find the opening of your tote bag and press the entire top edge down a 1/2 inch. Now I'm doing this on my wool pressing mat because this is where it's easiest for me to film, but I do recommend just doing this on a normal ironing board because then you'll be able to just wrap it around that outer edge, and then pressing the seam will actually be quite easy. So press that seam in a 1/2 inch, and of course check on it with your measuring gauge, and then I just grab my clips and clip it in place so that it can cool folded down. down. And now we need to do this same thing once again, except we are going to fold our top edge down a full inch. Again, you'll use your measuring gauge to make sure that it's lining up the same around the entire outer edge. Just pin it in place, but this time I actually do like to use my long magic pins for this process. I find it's easier to hold everything in place that way. Once the entire top edge has been folded down at that 1 inch fold, now we need to measure in to figure out where our straps are going to lay. So you will measure from your outer seam in 3 inches and then just draw a mark. You can use this with any marking pen you want, but if you want to get rid of those marks when you're done, make sure you're using a water-soluble marking pen or a friction pen. I will have them linked in the description below, along with my favorite sewing tool, that measuring gauge. It is the cheapest and most useful sewing tool that I have. Once you have those 3-inch marks on both sides, then you can tuck your straps in underneath that top fold and clip it in place. So the outer edge of your strap will line up with that 3-inch marked line that we made. And of course, make sure that your strap is not twisted as it goes around to the other side. And then clip that end in place as well. Do this for both straps. And now it's time to take this to your sewing machine and sew 1/8 of an inch seam allowance around that inner fold all the way around the entire tote bag. The easiest way to do this is to remove that extra arm that is on your sewing machine so that you can actually loop your tote bag around just a little bit easier. And another thing to note, it's at this point that you are actually starting to sew through thicker layers of fabric. So make sure that you are sewing slowly over these thicker areas. If you are struggling, switch to a jean sewing needle. Now it's time to fold our handles upwards, pin them in place, and then we will sew another 1/8 seam allowance around the entire top edge. And again, start and stop with a back stitch, and of course, sew slowly over those thicker sections of fabric. And now it's time to turn our project right side out. Use your finger to gently press out those 2 bottom corners, and you've got yourself a tote bag. At this point, you can stop, but I do recommend you do one more thing to make your tote bag last the longest it can. And this last step will take a little bit of extra patience, but I highly recommend that you sew an X formation on all 4 handles where they're connecting to your tote bag. This will secure those handles in place so that this tote bag can carry heavier items and not pull on that top seam that we've sewn around that entire outer edge. Then give those final edges a nice press and you've got yourself a beautiful tote bag. All right, you guys, I hope you enjoyed sewing this lovely and easy tote bag. And let me know in the comments down below what you have been sewing lately and what you look forward to sewing next. Maybe I will make a tutorial for you. I hope that you guys have a wonderful day and I will see you next time. Bye for now.